What did Jesus Christ look like in the most ancient Christian iconography? Let's dig into it. So, ancient Christian iconography provides our earliest witnesses of Jesus' appearance. The archaeology is rich with images of Jesus, some dating as early as the 3rd century, some possibly to the 2nd century, which is about as old as our oldest New Testament manuscripts. And by virtue of their Greco-Roman culture, early Christians valued likeness in their art. So when they painted these depictions of Jesus, it seems like they were intending and understood these images to be true likenesses of Jesus as he appeared to his followers on earth. And we have good reason to believe from the written resources and from the archaeology that their depictions of Jesus are from an ancient iconographic tradition going back possibly to eyewitnesses of Jesus. For more information about these points, you can see my other videos on these topics. So early Christian iconography, therefore, gives an exciting window into what Jesus' followers might have seen when they were with Jesus on earth. So what does archaeology show for the image of Jesus? Well, as it turns out, it's a little bit complicated. There is some diversity in Jesus's appearance. And you're probably familiar with the fact that there are some variations in Jesus's depictions in early Christian art. However, I want to emphasize that there's also much in agreement in the early Christian art. Okay, so even though there's a few variations in maybe different types in the images of Jesus, there's a lot which the early Christian art agrees on with regards to Jesus's image. So for example, early Christian art agrees that Jesus looks gentle and graceful and sweet-natured. So if you take the majority of art and you look at them, you compare them together, you're going to see this consistent depiction of Jesus as a gentle, graceful, and sweet-natured man, which tells you something about how early Christians experienced Jesus and his personality, which is really interesting. He was of average height and weight, so not abnormally fat or skinny or tall or short. He was an average body weight and height. He has an oval face and beige-colored skin, and this is consistent with the art that we see in Dura Europos of Jews, by Jews, and the color of skin they have. He had dark brown, wavy, or curly hair, and discoveries of 1st century Jewish hair in Masada and Akeldama in Israel agree with his color. And he wore a white tunic with dark-colored clavi. That's the stripe on his tunic, usually brown or blue. And he wore a pallium, or a himation in Greek, and sandals. And these pieces of clothing are actually mentioned in Scripture. Dr. Robin Jensen writes, the earliest images of Jesus showed him dressed in simple tunic and pallium and sandaled feet, the same stature as his disciples and followers, curly hair. He has a gentle expression, smooth oval face. He appears to be both graceful and rather sweet-natured. So these are things that the majority of ancient Christian art agrees on with regards to Jesus's appearance. So early Christians are making these images of Jesus. They understand them to be a true likeness of Jesus. They're copying archetypal images from an ancient iconographic tradition, and multiple witnesses agree on these features. So I think that when it comes to the question of what did Jesus look like, well, from our earliest witness, the ancient iconography, these things stand out, and they stand out as being very reliable, I think. So I think we can trust that these are accurate descriptions of what Jesus really looked like. So here are some examples of early Christian art showing these features. These are from different places. One of these is a Syriac manuscript from Syriac Christians. One is from Syria. The others are from Rome. Some of these are very early, dating possibly to the 2nd century. And you can see, regardless of when or where, there's agreement about these features. You can see in each of these depictions, he has a similar body shape, a similar height. He has a similar expression, that gentle, sweet-natured expression. He has that dark brown curly hair. These are all things that are agreed on, and you can see just looking at these depictions that, okay, there was some consistency in the early Christian iconographic tradition. There's some consistency there, which is what you'd expect if this is a true likeness of Jesus. Now, of course, you can already see that, okay, his hair length might vary and his beard might vary. That's some of that diversity. But I just want to start off by pointing out it's not completely random. It's not completely chaotic. There is some consistency, actually a lot of consistency in how early Christians depicted Jesus. So how about the diversity? Well, there is some disagreement in the archaeological record about Jesus's hair length and whether or not he had a beard. Robin Jensen writes, a survey of the extant examples coming mainly from the environs of Rome shows us that most of the earliest recognizable iconography of Jesus presents him as a beardless and beautiful youth, although in rare instances he also appears as bearded and more mature in appearance. So sometimes he has short hair, sometimes long hair, sometimes it's kind of mid-length, sometimes it's ambiguous what it is. Sometimes he has a beard, sometimes no beard. Okay, so these features break the images of Jesus into four types: short hair, no beard, short hair, beard, long hair, no beard, and long hair, beard. So let's go through each of these types and kind of talk about them a little bit and how strong they're represented in the archaeological record. So the first type is that short hair, no beard. I have three examples here. Two are from Rome, one is from Syria. All three of these examples are very early, and in fact, most of our earliest depictions of Jesus depict him in this type. And you can see that consistency of short, curly, dark brown hair and no beard. This type of Jesus's appearance is virtually unanimous in our earliest extant depictions of Jesus from the 2nd, 3rd century. But instances of this type can be seen even throughout the 4th century, all the way up into the 6th century in places like San Vitale in Ravenna. So for about 500 years, this was a major way to depict Jesus, and a very common type for the image of Jesus. And just a quick note on this, we should be careful when talking about the earliest depictions because these paintings don't come with timestamps. But just in general, in some of the oldest rooms and the oldest sites, they seem to depict Jesus in this type. It also has widespread geographical support, so it doesn't look like it's a local image of Jesus that was developed. It has representation of many different places. You can see this type for the image of Jesus in Rome, in France, Syria, Montenegro, Croatia, Germany, Ravenna, etc. It's very common in scenes from Jesus's ministry years, which I think is very significant, and it'll become really important later when we start discussing about why there are these variances in his hair length. That'll be in another video. But its quantity, its antiquity, and its geographical dispersion altogether provide very strong evidence for its authenticity. So if you were to guess at what the authentic image of Jesus is, well, this has a lot of support behind it. And I think it's good to let the data speak for itself and then maybe try to explain what the data is showing instead of discrediting it. So I think it's very significant, keeping in mind that this has a strong case from the archaeology. The second type is a short hair with a beard. There are some examples of this in Rome on sarcophagi. There's an icon of this type from St. Catherine's Monastery, which dates to the 6th century. And Jesus is also seen in this type in some Syriac manuscripts like the Rabbula Gospels. There's also a gold glass that has this, which dates to the 4th century. And again, there are multiple Syriac manuscripts from the 6th century. However, just from my observation, it seems to be the least common among the four types, which is interesting because I think a lot of people try to reconstruct the image of Jesus and they make something like this. And I just find it ironic that it seems to be the least common, but you do see it. You do find it in certain places, in certain instances. The next type is long hair and no beard. And I have 3 different examples here, one from Ravenna, one from Rome, and one interestingly from England. So we have a totally different geographical transmission line of Jesus's appearance, and it has this appearance for Jesus, which I find very interesting. Our earliest extant examples of this one seem to be from the 4th century, when it was very common. A lot of 4th century depictions of Jesus depict him as this type. That makes it as old as our oldest complete Bibles, like Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, which I just find interesting. It's a very popular type and continued to be popular in churches throughout the 6th century. So it's running parallel to type 1, which is something interesting as well. It's very common in Jesus's ministry years as well. It has widespread geographical support. You can find instances of it in Rome, Sicily, Spain, France, England, Greece, Ravenna. Okay, so I mentioned some points about its age to emphasize that it's not really showing an evolution per se of going from short hair to long hair, but the short hair and long hair depictions are running parallel. And then finally, long hair with a beard. This is the conventional, familiar image of Jesus that we have today. And it is quite common, especially from the 4th century forward. I have some examples here from Ostia, Italy, the famous painting from the catacombs of Comedilla in Rome, and then an Egyptian icon dated to the 5th or 6th century. It's noteworthy that now we have an Egyptian representation of Jesus in this type. I have some more images here. Another one from Egypt, the famous painting from St. Catherine's Monastery, dating to the 6th century, Syriac Rabbula Gospels. And I have some more images. I show a lot of these ones because I want to emphasize that this isn't actually rare. There's does have a lot of representation from different places and different times. We have France, we have Ravenna, some more from Rome. Okay, so our earliest examples of this type seem to be from the 4th century. But again, remember that date is, it's a good guess, but we're not 100% sure because they don't come with timestamps. But it seems to be 4th century is our oldest examples of this, which again makes it the same age as our oldest complete Bibles. There are 5th and 6th century examples from Egypt and Syriac manuscripts, which perhaps implies an Eastern transmission line. So it doesn't seem by the archaeology that there's a local tradition of Jesus having long hair and a beard. It seems to be widespread, and there seems to be an independent Eastern witness of Jesus in this type, which is interesting. But I think the most interesting feature of this type is that it's common in scenes of Christ's passion, and especially common in scenes of Christ in glory. So images of Jesus enthroned as a judge or a lawgiver or a teacher typically depict Jesus in this type. So that could give a clue as to why there's a variance in these types. Maybe it has to do with what he's doing in that scene, or what period in his life that scene is depicting. This is the image of Christ that corresponds to the Mandalion, the Veil of Veronica, the letter of Publius Lentulus, and the Shroud of Turin. So if you believe in those legends, you believe that those are accurate depictions, well, this is the image of Jesus that corresponds to those images. So why are there different types of Jesus's image? Early Christians preserved the appearance of Jesus's body and clothing, even the colors, but why are there variant styles for his beard and hair? Well, the honest answer is we don't know. They don't come with explanations. The iconographers didn't explain underneath it why in this picture he has long hair and why in this one he has short hair. They don't explain it. In the literature, there's no explanation of it. So we just don't know, okay? However, diversity doesn't necessarily mean unreliability. So we should be careful not to interpret variance in his hair and beard to mean that the early Christian iconography is unreliable or inaccurate. There could be other reasons why sometimes he has long hair and sometimes he has short hair. There are theories for why Jesus has different hair and different beard lengths in the archaeological record. And not all of these theories require us to discredit the integrity of early Christian art. And one example of these theories is that perhaps Jesus had short hair in the beginning of his ministry and then grew it out. So he had long hair at a different period in his life. If this is the case, then it would explain why some images show him as short-haired with no beard and some images show him as long-haired with a beard, and then some in the middle. So I will be discussing different theories for the variance in Jesus' hair and beard in another video. So if you haven't already, subscribe so you get access to that video. But I'm not going to go into the detail of those here, but I will later. So in conclusion, the majority of early Christian depictions show Jesus as a man with average height and weight, beige-colored skin, dark brown curly hair, a white tunic, pallium, and sandals. However, there's some diversity in Jesus' hair and beard length. These differences require careful examination and should not be taken as license to hastily dismiss early Christian art as unreliable. So I think it's very interesting that we have agreement in the majority of witnesses on these features. And we can really, I think, trust these features as accurate depictions of Jesus's real likeness. And when it comes to the diversity in his hair and his beard, well, we can examine the archaeology for some clues maybe as to why there's variances, which I'll be discussing in a future video. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.